My name is Rachel Roach, 42 years old, and for the last 19 years, my family has believed I'm just a useless, paper-stamping desk jockey. But I never thought I would be publicly humiliated like this, right in the middle of Los Angeles International Airport. My brother Garrett stood there in his slick Armani suit, waving an economy-class boarding pass in my face like he was tossing change to a beggar. He laughed loud enough for the whole line to hear, "Middle seat near the toilet, Rach. You're used to roughing it anyway. First class isn't for people living paycheck to paycheck." My mother looked away, embarrassed for me. But what they didn't know was that inside the pocket of my cheap jacket sat a code-red military ID, and a C-37B military jet was awaiting clearance to take off just for me. They thought I was the black sheep of the family. They had no idea the storm that was about to hit when the gate guard saw my badge. Before we keep going, take a second to hit like and subscribe, but only if you really like this story. Also, drop your location and local time in the comments. I'd love to know where you're listening from. The drive up my parents' driveway in Orange County felt longer than a combat deployment. My spine ached. 24 straight hours in a windowless room in DC tracking a grid threat will do that to you. I killed the engine of my 2008 Ford F-150. It sputtered, choked, and finally died. The exhaust smelled like cheap gas and burnt oil. I parked it right next to a glaringly white Tesla Model X. The gull-wing doors were popped open like it was ready to take flight. "Watch the paint, Rach." Garrett. He stood on the porch, a glass of bourbon in one hand, wearing a cashmere sweater that probably cost more than my truck's transmission. He gestured with his drink toward my dented fender. "You leak oil on my concrete, you're paying for the power wash. Seriously, when are you going to scrap that piece of junk?" I ignored him, grabbed my duffel bag from the passenger seat, shoulders squared, back straight, habit. I walked past him, smelling his overpriced cologne, masking the smell of sheer arrogance. Inside, the house smelled like roasted turkey and suffocating expectations. The TV blared from the living room. The Dallas Cowboys were down by 10. My dad was yelling at the screen, gripping a Bud Light like a weapon. "Hey, the prodigal daughter returns," Dad muttered, barely taking his eyes off the quarterback. "Grab a plate, Garrett's about to carve." We gathered around the dining table, the picture-perfect American family. Garrett stood at the head, slicing the turkey with an electric knife like he was performing surgery. He didn't stop talking, not for a single second. So the seed round closed at 50 mil. Garrett bragged, tossing meat onto a platter. "My options alone will cover the new cabin in Aspen." Blanca already picked out the heated floors. Blanca, his wife, sat there nodding. Her diamond ring caught the chandelier light every time she moved her hand. Mom hovered around Garrett like he was a visiting dignitary. She took his plate. With silver tongs, she picked up a massive, glistening turkey leg. Dark meat, dripping with juice. She set it gently down in front of him. "Eat up, honey," Mom cooed, patting his shoulder. "You use that big brain of yours all day running that startup. You need the protein." Then she turned to me. Her smile tightened. She reached for the driest, chalkiest part of the breast meat. 2 thin, sad slices, dropped them on my plate next to a spoonful of plain green beans. "There you go, Rachel," Mom said, taking her seat. "You work with your hands at that little desk job. Best to watch the carbs. We don't want you getting sluggish." I stared at the dry meat. I hadn't eaten a hot meal in 2 days. I picked up my fork. Garrett clinked his fork against his crystal water glass. "All right, listen up, Mom, Dad. For your 40th anniversary this spring, I'm taking care of it. Total package. We're doing Hawaii." Mom gasped. Dad finally looked away from the football game. 5-star resort in Maui. Garrett continued soaking up their adoration. He looked over at me. A condescending smirk crept across his face. "Don't worry about the cost, Rach. I got the tab. You just pack your little duffel bag. I'll find a cheap Motel 6 down the road for you. You're low maintenance, used to roughing it, right?" My jaw tightened. I took a slow, deliberate breath. 4 seconds in, 4 seconds out. Heart rate steady. Keep it under control. "Actually," I said, my voice quiet but cutting through the room, "I just got bumped up at the department. The clearance level." "Let's not ruin a good mood, kid," Dad interrupted, waving his beer bottle at me dismissively. A government pension is safe. It pays the rent. Just be happy with that. Leave the big leagues to your brother. Garrett chuckled. He reached into his pocket and tossed a small velvet box across the table. It landed by Dad's plate. Go ahead, open it. Dad flipped it open. A shiny Lexus key fob. Mom screamed. Blanca clapped. It's out in the driveway, Garrett beamed. Merry Thanksgiving. While they were losing their minds over leased luxury, Garrett slid a thin white envelope across the table toward me. It stopped against my plate. Didn't forget you, sis, Garrett said, taking a sip of his wine. Figured you could use a break at the checkout aisle. I picked up the envelope. The paper was cheap. I tore it open. Inside was a small stack of paper clipped together. Walmart grocery coupons, 50 cents off canned soup, $1 off laundry detergent. I flipped the top one over. The expiration date was stamped in red ink. October 15th. It was late November. He gave me trash. Expired trash. I didn't yell. I didn't throw it back in his face. That's what civilians do. They lose their temper. They break. I just sat there in absolute terrifying silence. I folded the expired coupons neatly in half, creasing the edge perfectly with my thumb, and slid them into my jeans pocket. I picked up my fork, stabbed the dry, flavorless turkey breast, and put it in my mouth. It tasted like ash. As I chewed, the noise of their celebration faded away. The clinking glasses and the loud TV vanished. The dry meat catching in my throat felt exactly like the gritty sand of the Kandahar mess hall right before the mortar sirens started screaming. The taste of that dry, chalky turkey breast lingered in my mouth the whole flight back to the East Coast. It tasted like ash. It tasted exactly like the grit blowing off the tarmac at Kandahar Airfield, right before the mortar sirens screamed. I washed it down with bad airplane coffee, staring out the scratched window at the blackness below. My family thought I was flying back to a cramped cubicle, to a life of insignificance. My apartment in Washington, D.C., just a few miles from the Pentagon, was dead quiet. No blaring football games, no clinking crystal glasses, just the low hum of the HVAC system and the sterile smell of bleach on hardwood floors. I dropped my cheap duffel bag by the door. No clutter here. Every surface was wiped clean. Bare walls, no family photos. I walked to the bedroom closet and knelt in front of a heavy steel gun safe bolted to the floor. I punched in the 12-digit biometric code. The heavy bolts clanked open. Inside wasn't a collection of discount coupons or old tax returns. Hanging neatly in dry cleaning plastic was an army dress uniform. A colonel's silver eagles pinned crisp and perfect on the shoulders. Below it, a rack of encrypted comms gear blinking with green standby lights. The real Rachel Roach. I reached past the tactical gear and pulled out a battered Nike shoebox from the bottom shelf. The cardboard was soft and peeling at the corners. I sat on the edge of my perfectly made bed and took off the lid. Dad's words from the dinner table echoed in the quiet room. Leave the big leagues to your brother. He said the exact same thing 19 years ago. I remember the smell of the catered barbecue in our backyard. Garrett had just gotten into Stanford. Mom rented a massive white tent. Dad bought a case of imported champagne. The whole neighborhood came over to toast the boy genius. I stood by the fence holding my acceptance letter from the United States Military Academy at West Point. An appointment signed by a sitting congressman. Less than 10% of applicants get in. I handed it to my dad while he was icing down some beers. He glanced at the official seal, wiped his wet hands on his jeans, and handed it back. West Point, huh? He grunted. Well, at least it saves us tuition money. Go grab your brother another burger. No toast, no tent, just a free ride so they could funnel more cash into Garrett's startup dreams. I looked down at the contents of the shoebox. Stacked inside were dozens of letters in standard military envelopes. They were addressed to my parents' house in Orange County. They were all marked "Return to Sender" or just tossed back into the mail pile. Some were stained with coffee rings. Others had been stepped on. Not a single one had been opened. I picked up a letter dated 2010. I wrote that one by flashlight in a bunker in Helmand Province, my hands shaking from the adrenaline of a 3-hour firefight. I just wanted them to know I was alive. I wanted someone back home to care. They never broke the seal. But the monthly allotment checks I sent to help them pay off Garrett's first failed business venture, Those were cashed within 48 hours, every single time. My silence wasn't weakness, it was armor. You learn real quick in a combat zone that screaming for help only gives the enemy your position. My family wasn't the enemy, but giving them my pain was just giving them ammunition. I dropped the letter back into the box. I stood up, walked into the cold bathroom, and turned on the harsh fluorescent light above the sink. I pulled the gray t-shirt over my head and dropped it on the floor. I turned sideways, looking at my reflection. High on my right shoulder, just below the collarbone, was a jagged, puckered starburst of thick, pink tissue. An exit wound. A 7.62 millimeter reminder of a bad day in a dusty valley that no one in California could point to on a map. I remember the phone call I made from the hospital at Ramstein Air Base in Germany, the heavy painkillers making my tongue thick. I told my mother I was hurt. I told her I was coming home for surgery. "Oh, Rachel," she had sighed through the receiver, the irritation bleeding through the line. "Still so clumsy. Falling off a bike at your age, Garrett just closed his first seed round, and now I have to leave his celebration dinner to pick you up at the airport." I didn't tell her about the ambush. I didn't tell her about the Purple Heart sitting in a velvet box next to my dress uniform. I just said I was sorry to interrupt her evening. I traced the edge of the scar with 2 fingers. The skin was numb, but the memory burned. If you have ever felt invisible in your own family, if you have ever swallowed your pain because you knew the people supposed to love you would only use it against you, do me a favor. Hit the like button and subscribe. And drop a comment below with just the word survivor. It helps to know I am not the only one fighting this silent war. I rested my hands on the cold porcelain of the sink. I stared into my own exhausted eyes in the mirror. I had spent nearly 2 decades of my life taking bullets, tracking threats, and protecting millions of Americans sleeping soundly in their beds. But as I stood there in the dead of night, a bitter question clawed at my throat. Who was supposed to protect me from my own blood? Before I could answer my own question, the silence of the apartment shattered. It wasn't my personal cell phone. It was the heavy encrypted satellite phone locked inside the steel safe, a blaring, high-pitched klaxon. Code red. Priority 1. The self-pity died instantly. The soldier took over. The klaxon from the safe didn't just wake me, it rewired my nervous system. 40 minutes later, I was deep underground in a Pentagon SCIF. No windows, no natural light, just banks of monitors glowing aggressive shades of red and the hum of industrial air conditioning freezing the sweat on the back of my neck. 72 hours. That's how long I had been awake. My eyes felt like they were full of crushed glass. I lived on black burnt coffee from a styrofoam cup that tasted like battery acid. The threat was real. A coordinated cyber attack blinding the power grid on Oahu, coupled with intercepted chatter of a physical breach aimed at the Joint Base Pearl Harbor Hickam. Millions of civilians in the dark. Military assets exposed. I stood at the head of the tactical table spine, straight shoulders locked. Around me, intelligence analysts slumped in their chairs, rubbing their temples defeated by the endless stream of encrypted code. I didn't have the luxury of slumping. As the USA SOC commander for this theater, the buck stopped with my boots. I stepped out of the pit for a 90-second bathroom break. Standard protocol required personal electronics to remain in the outer locker. I opened my small metal cubby. My phone screen was lit up. 7 missed notifications. In a national security crisis, a buzzing phone usually means a casualty. My pulse kicked. I grabbed the device. It wasn't the Situation Room. It was Blanca, my sister-in-law. "Hey, Rach, just finalizing the Maui packing list. Make sure you bring your own copper tone or whatever cheap stuff you use. Don't ask to borrow mine. My dermatologist says my skin is way too sensitive for drugstore brands. See you at the airport." I stared at the screen. My thumb hovered over the glass. I was tracking a terrorist cell operating in the Pacific, and this woman was worried about me stealing her Sephora sunscreen. My jaw locked so tight my teeth ached. I swiped the notification away. Before I could toss the phone back into the locker, it vibrated in my palm. Incoming call. Garrett. I hit accept and pressed the phone to my ear. I didn't say a word. Finally, Garrett's voice barked through the speaker. The audio was crystal clear, echoing slightly. He was on the Bluetooth in his Tesla, probably cruising down the 405 highway. Did you read Blanca's text? She's stressed about the logistics. Look, I need you to confirm you requested the time off for the anniversary trip. I leaned my forehead against the cold-painted cinder block wall of the hallway. I'm working a situation, Garrett. A situation. He let out a loud barking laugh. What, the copy machine jammed? Listen to me. Walk into your supervisor's office today and tell them you're taking the week. If they say no, just quit. I closed my eyes. The sheer audacity of his voice grating against the quiet severity of the Pentagon was enough to make my stomach turn. It's a government desk job, Rachel. Garrett continued, his tone dripping with condescension. You're a glorified mailman. Nobody is going to miss you licking envelopes for a few days. I'm paying for the hotel. The least you can do is show up on time to carry the bags. The heavy steel door of the SCIF opened. Major Hayes stepped into the hallway. His face was grim tight with exhaustion. He didn't speak. He just held out a thick red folder stamped with top secret classification. I kept the phone pressed to my ear. I took the folder with my free hand. I flipped it open. It was the deployment authorization. 1st Special Forces Operational Detachment Delta. Delta Force, a green light to put boots on the ground in Oahu. Lethal force authorized. Are you even listening to me? Garrett demanded, his voice raising a pitch. I swear to God, Rachel, if you embarrass me by missing this flight because of some useless administrative backlog. I reached into my chest pocket and pulled out my tactical pen. Solid, heavy steel. I clicked it open with my thumb. Garrett, I said. My voice was a dead flat calm. It was the same tone I used when calling in an airstrike. What? He snapped. I pressed the pen to the paper. I signed my name at the bottom of the order, Colonel Rachel Roach. I handed the red folder back to Major Hayes. He gave a sharp nod and practically sprinted back into the operations room. I had just initiated a cascade of violence that would save thousands of lives. I'll be in Hawaii, I told my brother. Don't worry about my schedule. I didn't wait for his response. I ended the call, held the power button down until the screen went black. I tossed the dead piece of plastic into the metal locker and slammed the door shut. The echo of the metal door ringing in the concrete hallway was the only sound for a long moment. The physical toll of the last 3 days crashed down on my shoulders like a sack of wet cement. My knees wanted to buckle. I didn't let them. I was going to Hawaii. My team was deploying to the exact same island my brother had booked for his arrogant display of wealth. I couldn't back out of the family trip now without blowing my cover, and I couldn't abandon my men in the field. I had to merge the two. I had to walk into a luxury resort carrying the weight of a Black Ops command. I couldn't authorize that crossover myself. It required a sign-off from the very top. I opened my eyes, the exhaustion burning away into cold, hard resolve. I adjusted the collar of my uniform, making sure the fabric was perfectly straight. I wiped the invisible dust from my sleeves. I turned away from the SCIF and headed toward the elevator bank. I needed to go up to the E-ring. I needed to see General Miller. The elevator dinged on the Pentagon's E-ring. The air up here was different, heavy, quiet. It smelled like lemon wax, expensive leather, and serious money. No frantic running, no screaming phones. Just the slow grinding gears of the United States war machine. My combat boots squeaked slightly on the polished floor. I walked past the receptionist. She didn't ask for my badge. She just nodded toward the heavy oak door. Lieutenant General Mike Iron Miller sat behind a massive mahogany desk. 3 silver stars pinned to his collar. A rack of ribbons on his chest that told a story of 30 years in the dirt. He didn't look up from the classified file he was reading. He just pointed his silver pen at the leather chair opposite him. Sit, Colonel. I didn't sit. I stood at parade rest, feet shoulder-width apart, hands clasped behind my back. Sir, the operation is greenlit. Delta is spinning up out of Fort Bragg. ETA to Oahu is 14 hours. Miller finally looked up. He set the pen down. He didn't look at the tactical map on the wall. He looked right at me. He saw the dark circles under my eyes. He saw the slight tremor in my left hand from living on black coffee and adrenaline for 3 days straight. You look like a corpse, Roach. Sit down before you fall down. I sat. My spine stayed rigid, hovering 2 inches off the backrest. I need a logistical override, General, I said, keeping my voice clipped. I need to be on the ground in Hawaii by tomorrow morning to coordinate the Delta team, but I need it off the official books. Miller leaned back. The heavy leather chair groaned under his weight. Why the ghost run? I swallowed hard. I hated this part. It felt like a failure of command, a leak in my own armor. My family, I said. They booked a trip to Maui for my parents' anniversary. My brother organized the whole thing. Miller's gray eyebrows pulled together. So, take a commercial flight out of Dulles. Have the agency reimburse the ticket. I can't, I replied, my voice dead flat. My brother bought the tickets. If I don't show up, they'll ask questions. If I try to explain I have a job to do, they'll laugh. Miller didn't say anything. He just stared at me. The silence in the office stretched out. The antique grandfather clock in the corner ticked loud and rhythmic. Explain that, Miller ordered quietly. I kept my eyes locked on the wall behind his head, focusing on a framed photograph of a Black Hawk helicopter. They think I'm a low-level clerk, sir. They think I sort mail. My brother is a tech CEO in Silicon Valley. He likes to remind me of my place. If I tell them I'm managing a national security crisis, they'll think I'm making up a pathetic excuse to get out of carrying their luggage. I expected a chuckle. Maybe a shake of the head. Instead, Miller's jaw set like granite. His eyes went cold. He didn't see a joke. He saw a direct insult to his command. They think you're a clerk, he repeated. The words tasted like poison in his mouth. A combat-decorated commander, 2 tours in Kandahar, a Purple Heart, and they think you lick stamps. I didn't flinch. It keeps the cover intact, sir. It's easier. Easier for who? Miller snapped. He slammed his hand flat on the desk. A row of brass challenge coins rattled on the wooden shelf. You take bullets for this country, Roach. You don't take shit from a civilian, not even blood. He pulled a heavy red phone across the desk. He punched a single button. Airfield Command. Give me a bird. C-37B. Wheels up at 0400. VIP configuration. Priority 1. He slammed the receiver down. He didn't ask if I wanted the jet. He looked across the desk at me. The anger drained out of his face, replaced by something heavier. Something I hadn't seen in 19 years. Deep, unfiltered respect. You've been looking at the dirt too long, Colonel, Miller said softly. You let them shrink you down so they can feel tall. It stops today. You walk into that airport with your head up. That is an order. I felt a sudden sharp ache in my throat. I locked my jaw, fighting the physical reaction. Yes, sir. Miller stood up. He walked around the massive desk. He was a giant of a man built like a brick wall. He stopped in front of me and put a heavy, warm hand on my shoulder. It was a firm grip, an anchor. You don't owe them a damn thing. You hear me. Miller's voice dropped rough and quiet. America is proud of you. I am proud of you. My eyes burned. Just for a second. I had waited my entire life to hear my own father say those exact words. I spent my youth chasing a ghost of approval that never existed. Instead, I got it here from a man who shared zero DNA with me, but understood exactly what I was worth. Thank you, sir, I whispered. It was the only thing I could manage without my voice breaking. Get out of here, Colonel. Go pack your bags. I gave him a sharp salute, turned on my heel, and walked out of the office. For the first time in days, the crushing weight in my chest eased. I stepped into the elevator and hit the button for the lobby. The heavy doors started to slide shut. Deep in my pocket, my personal cell phone vibrated, the cheap burner I kept just for the family. I pulled it out. The screen lit up with a text message from Garrett. Be at the house at 5 a.m. sharp. Don't be late. I have 4 heavy Louis Vuitton bags. You're loading the SUV. The elevator doors locked together with a heavy metallic clank. The peace was dead. The war was back on. 5 in the morning in Orange County. The air was damp, cutting through my thin jacket, smelling of wet asphalt and lawn sprinklers. I stood by the rear bumper of Garrett's rented Cadillac Escalade. 4 massive Louis Vuitton suitcases sat on the concrete driveway. The leather was pristine, The brass hardware caught the harsh glare of the motion sensor security light. "Don't scratch the paint, Rach," Garrett said. He didn't offer a hand. He stood up on the porch under the awning, rolling back the cuff of his crisp linen blazer to tap the crystal face of his Rolex. I grabbed the first bag. Heavy. Felt like 80 pounds of shoes and hair products. I hoisted it up, clearing the bumper by an inch, and shoved it into the deep trunk of the SUV. Then the second, the third, the fourth. The muscles in my lower back pulled tight. I didn't break a sweat. I was used to loading heavy crates of ammunition in the desert heat. Designer luggage was nothing. But the silent humiliation was heavy. Everybody and Garrett barked, sliding into the driver's leather seat. Blanca took shotgun. Mom and Dad took the plush second-row captain's chairs. Garrett's two kids, aged 8 and 10, scrambled into the back. I stood on the curb. The only space left was the third-row jump seat. Half of it was folded flat to make room for the Louis Vuitton bags. I climbed in. The space was meant for a toddler, not a fully grown woman. My knees pressed hard against my chest. The sharp brass corner of a suitcase dug right into my ribs. The air back here was stale. No AC vents reached the trunk. "We good," Garrett yelled. He didn't check the rearview mirror. He blasted some loud generic pop music and threw the Escalade into drive. We jerked away from the curb. The kids sat next to me on the bench, glued to their glowing iPads. The older one ripped open a plastic wrapper of gummy worms. He missed the cup holder. The trash fluttered down, landing on the toe of my combat boot. He didn't pick it up. He didn't even look at me. I was just part of the upholstery. We hit the Interstate 405. Total gridlock. A massive, endless river of red brake lights stretching out toward Los Angeles. We crawled at 5 miles an hour. The heater blasted up front, making the back of the SUV feel like a suffocating sauna. Garrett pulled off the highway and whipped into a Starbucks drive-thru. Large caramel macchiato, extra foam. Blanca ordered from the passenger seat, not bothering to look away from her phone. Garrett ordered 4 more drinks. Frappuccinos for the kids. Lattes for Mom and Dad. The smell of burnt espresso and hot liquid sugar filled the car. It made my mouth water. I hadn't had anything to drink since the bitter Pentagon coffee over 24 hours ago. My throat felt like dry sandpaper. Garrett handed the cardboard tray to the second row. Everyone grabbed a cup. The kids slurped the whipped cream loudly, the plastic straws scraping against the bottom of the cups. I waited. Nothing came back to the third row. Garrett caught my eye in the rearview mirror. He took a long, slow sip of his iced coffee. "Oh, man. Rach, I totally forgot you were back there," he said. He didn't sound sorry. His lips curled into a cruel half-smile. "I figured you ate at home anyway. You're trying to keep the weight off, right? Just drink some water. It's healthier." He turned the radio volume up. I didn't answer. I reached into my canvas duffel bag and pulled out a dented plastic water bottle. I took a slow sip of the warm, stale water. I let the silence stretch. Let them enjoy their sugar. The traffic on the 405 finally broke. We merged onto Century Boulevard and pulled into the chaotic drop-off lanes at Los Angeles International Airport. Horns blared. Jet engines roared overhead. The thick air smelled of aviation fuel and exhaust. Garrett threw the SUV in park. "All right, everyone out. Rach, grab the bags. I need to go print the boarding passes at the VIP kiosk." He grabbed his leather briefcase and walked away. Blanca grabbed the kids' hands and followed him. They didn't look back. I climbed out of the cramped third row. My joints popped. I dragged the 4 heavy suitcases onto the concrete sidewalk, lining them up perfectly. Mom stepped out of the second row. She smoothed down her silk blouse. She looked at me. Her eyes scanned up and down, taking in my scuffed boots, my cheap denim jacket, and the dark circles under my eyes. She stepped closer. Her voice was a hushed, urgent whisper. "Rachel, listen to me," she said, looking around to make sure nobody was watching us. "When we get inside, just walk a few paces behind us. Okay." I stopped pulling the handle of the suitcase. I looked at her. "Your brother worked very hard to get us first class." Mom continued, her voice tightening with irritation. "You look incredibly sloppy." I don't want the gate agents treating Garrett poorly because they think he's associated with someone who looks well, like you. She gave me a tight fake smile, turned on her heel, and walked toward the sliding glass doors of the terminal. I stood alone on the curb. The roar of a commercial jet taking off shook the concrete under my boots. I closed my eyes. I curled my hands into fists. I squeezed until my fingernails dug deep into the flesh of my palms. 4 sharp half-moon cuts. The physical sting grounded me. It kept the rage from boiling over into a public screaming match. Walk a few paces behind. I opened my eyes. I let go of the suitcases. I reached into the inside pocket of my jacket. My fingers brushed the cold, hard metal of the military identification badge. They had exactly 10 minutes left to treat me like a dog. Tom Bradley International Terminal at LAX was an absolute zoo. The heavy glass sliding doors parted, hitting us with a blast of over-conditioned air that smelled like floor wax, stale pretzels, and aviation fuel. Thousands of exhausted people dragged rolling bags across the scuffed linoleum. Babies screamed. The PA system echoed overhead with overlapping, unintelligible announcements. To our left, the economy check-in line snaked back and forth through a maze of nylon ropes. Hundreds of people packed together like cattle. Kids sitting on duffel bags. People eating cold sandwiches out of plastic wrappers. They all looked miserable, exhausted, and resigned to the grind of commercial travel. Garrett didn't even glance in their direction. He adjusted the lapels of his linen blazer, gripped the handle of his Louis Vuitton suitcase, and marched us straight toward the right, the priority first-class lane. There was a thick crimson carpet, heavy brass stanchions holding up velvet ropes, and zero waiting. Garrett strolled up to the polished marble counter like he owned the airline. He dropped his heavy bags on the metal scale with a loud thud. He pulled a thick metal platinum medallion credit card from his wallet and slapped it down on the counter. The sound echoed sharp in the quiet VIP area. "Garrett Roach," he announced, his voice booming. "Party of 7 to Maui. Print the boarding passes, and we need our VIP lounge access keys. Make sure they know we're coming." The gate agent, a tired woman in a blue polyester vest with dark circles under her eyes, forced a tight corporate smile. She typed frantically on her keyboard. The heavy-duty printer behind the desk hummed to life. Thick, glossy cardstock tickets began to slide out. Garrett picked them up one by one. He held them like a dealer handing out winning hands at a high-stakes Vegas blackjack table. He was putting on a show. Not just for us, but for the hundreds of people stuck in the economy line 20 feet away. He wanted them to see him. He wanted them to know how much better he was. "Mom, Dad," Garrett said, handing over 2 glossy passes. "Row 2, window and aisle. They serve the champagne before takeoff, so make sure you ask for it." Mom beamed. She took the tickets, clutching them to her chest like a lottery win. "Oh, Garrett, you shouldn't have." He turned to his wife. "Blanca, you and the kids are in row 3. Pre-boarding is in 40 minutes. Take them to the lounge and get some food." Blanca smirked, adjusting her oversized designer sunglasses on top of her head. She snatched the passes and grabbed the kids' hands. Then Garrett turned to me. The printer behind the desk spat out one final ticket, but it didn't come out on the thick, glossy cardstock. It came out of a small automated machine on the side. It was a thin, flimsy strip of cheap thermal receipt paper. Garrett picked it up between his index and middle finger. He didn't hand it to me. He held it out in the space between us, letting it dangle in the air. Suddenly, the noise of the terminal seemed to drop away. The rolling suitcases, the screaming kids, the PA announcements, it all faded into a dull, distant hum. Time slowed down to a crawl. I could see the tiny dust particles floating in the fluorescent light between us. I could see the cruel, deliberate curl of Garrett's upper lip. He raised his voice. He made absolutely sure that the exhausted working-class people standing in the economy line right next to us could hear every single word. "Middle seat Rach," Garrett said, his voice dripping with venom. "Row 38, right next to the lavatory." Blanca let out a sharp nasal giggle. My mother suddenly found the digital departure board on the ceiling incredibly interesting. She turned her head completely away, refusing to make eye contact with me. She wouldn't defend me. She never did. Garrett shook the flimsy paper in my face. It made a pathetic, crinkling sound. "Sorry, kid," he said loud enough for the whole terminal to hear. "First class isn't for people living paycheck to paycheck. Maybe if you worked a little harder at that desk job, you wouldn't be flying with the cargo." A few people in the economy line turned to look at us. I felt their eyes burning into the side of my face. I felt the collective pity, the second-hand embarrassment. I didn't reach for the ticket. I didn't blink. The muscles in my jaw tightened, locking into place. My heart rate didn't spike into a panic. It dropped. Slow, steady, rhythmic thumps vibrating against my ribs. It was the exact same biological response, the exact same heart rate I had when I put a high-value target in the crosshairs of a rifle. I looked at Garrett. I didn't see my older brother. I saw a threat. I saw a pathetic, insecure bully who used his bank account as a weapon because he had absolutely zero courage in his blood. If you have ever stood in front of someone who tried to tear you down just to make themselves feel taller, if you know the burning heat of public humiliation, do me a favor. Hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment below with just the word, enough. It lets me know I have my squad standing right here with me. Garrett sighed, clearly annoyed that I wasn't giving him the tearful, humiliated reaction he wanted. He wanted me to look down. He wanted me to shrink. "Take the damn ticket, Rachel," Garrett snapped, shoving the paper toward my chest. "People are waiting." I took a slow half-step back, my heavy combat boots planted firm on his precious red carpet. I kept my eyes locked dead on his. I reached my right hand into the inside pocket of my faded, cheap denim jacket. My fingertips brushed past the useless, expired Walmart coupons he had given me the night before. They kept going, deeper into the pocket. My fingers found what they were looking for. The heavy, cold, black-edged metal of a Department of Defense Code red identification card. A piece of metal with clearance codes high enough to ground every single commercial flight on this tarmac with one phone call. I wrapped my fingers around the cold steel. It was time to pull the pin. The air in the VIP lane felt heavy, thick with my brother's manufactured superiority. Garrett held the flimsy thermal paper ticket out, waiting for me to take it, waiting for me to submit. I didn't take the ticket. I stepped past him. I ignored his exasperated sigh. I walked right up to the polished marble check-in counter. The tired gate agent looked up, annoyed that a woman in a faded denim jacket was interrupting her platinum tier transaction. "Ma'am, you need to wait your turn." The agent droned, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. I didn't speak. I reached into my jacket, pulled out the heavy black-edged Department of Defense identification card, and slapped it face up on the marble. It hit the stone with a solid metallic clack. The agent rolled her eyes, picking up her laser scanner. She hit the barcode on the back of the card. The machine didn't give the standard cheerful airline chime. It let out a harsh, two-tone error buzz. The agent frowned and looked at her monitor. I watched the reflection in her glasses. The blue corporate background of the airline software vanished. The entire screen flashed neon red. Big block white letters locked onto the center of the display. Priority 1. Yusei Soks, Commander. Clearance code, red. The blood instantly drained from the agent's face. Her jaw went slack. The laser scanner slipped out of her hand, clattering noisily onto the keyboard. She looked at the screen, then slowly looked up at me. Her eyes were wide pupils, dilated with sudden, absolute terror. I, she stammered, her voice a dry rasp. Then the terminal alarms kicked in. It wasn't a fire alarm. It was a localized security klaxon, a piercing rhythmic wail that cut through the noise of thousands of passengers. The amber strobe lights mounted above the VIP desk began to flash, casting harsh shadows across Garrett's Armani suit. At the TSA checkpoint 50 yards away, 4 agents froze, their hands instantly dropping to their duty belts. Garrett spun around. His chest heaved. He looked at the flashing lights, then down at the metallic card on the counter. His face flushed a dark, angry purple. "What the hell is this, Rachel?" Garrett yelled over the alarm, stepping toward me. "Did you give her a fake ID? Are you out of your mind? You're going to get us arrested." He slammed his hand on the counter, leaning aggressively toward the terrified gate agent. "Listen to me. She's my sister. She's just a low-level clerk. She doesn't have any money. This is a mistake." Turn that alarm off before you ruin our flight." The agent didn't even look at him. She was scrambling, her trembling hands reaching for a dedicated red landline phone bolted under the desk. She yanked the receiver off the hook. Code red. The agent gasped into the phone, ignoring Garrett completely. "Terminal 4, first class desk. I have a code red verification." "Rachel, tell her to stop." Mom shrieked from a few feet away, her voice cracking with panic. She was clutching her designer purse to her chest like a shield. "Tell them you're sorry." I didn't move a muscle. I stood at parade rest, hands clasped behind my back, staring straight ahead. Then came the sound. Heavy synchronized footfalls on hard linoleum. The sound of combat boots. A lot of them. From the far end of the terminal, a 12-man squad of military police sprinted through the concourse. They weren't airport security. They weren't local LAPD. They were federal MPs in full tactical gear. Olive drab plate carriers, drop-leg holsters, AR-15 rifles strapped tight across their chests. They hit the economy line like a battering ram. The crowd of exhausted travelers screamed, scattering in every direction, dropping luggage and diving out of the way. Garrett stumbled backward, putting his hands up in the air. "Whoa, hey! We didn't do anything. She's the one with the fake card." He thought they were coming to tackle me. He thought he was about to watch his little sister get slammed face first into the carpet and dragged away in handcuffs. The MPs didn't touch me. They rushed past Garrett, slamming their heavy shoulders into him, knocking him off balance. They formed a tight 360-degree defensive perimeter around the marble counter. They put their backs to me, facing the crowd, their hands resting on the grips of their rifles. "Step back," a massive sergeant barked, shoving Garrett hard in the chest. "Clear the perimeter, move!" Garrett tripped over his own Louis Vuitton suitcase and fell hard onto his backside. Blanca screamed, grabbing her two kids and pulling them behind a concrete pillar. The perimeter locked down. Total security. A tall army major in a crisp multicam uniform pushed his way through the line of MPs. He stopped dead exactly 3 feet in front of me. He didn't look at Garrett crying on the floor. He didn't look at my mother trembling against the velvet ropes. He looked at me. He snapped his heels together. The sound was like a gunshot. He threw a razor-sharp salute. "Colonel Roach!" The major shouted, his voice echoing off the high ceiling of the terminal. "Airfield Command has your C-37B prepped on the private tarmac. Engines are hot. We are here to escort you to your jet, ma'am." The entire terminal went dead silent. The only sound was the rhythmic flashing of the amber strobe light. Garrett sat on the floor. His mouth hung open. The muscles in his neck twitched. He looked up at the major, then slowly turned his head to look at me. The arrogant tech CEO sneer was gone. It was replaced by raw, unadulterated shock. His brain couldn't process the math. The flimsy thermal paper economy ticket slipped out of his trembling fingers. It fluttered in the air for a second before landing softly on the red carpet right next to the scuffed toe of my combat boot. "Colonel," my father whispered from the edge of the perimeter. His voice was hollow, weak. "You're a Colonel Wati is." Outside the ring of heavily armed soldiers, the crowd had recovered from their initial panic. Dozens of smartphones were already raised in the air. The little red recording lights blinked from every direction. Hundreds of lenses focused right on Garrett, the loudmouth bully in the Armani suit, currently sitting on the floor, surrounded by military firepower. I looked down at the paper ticket by my boot. Then I looked down at my brother. Garrett scrambled to his feet. The knees of his custom-tailored suit pants were covered in gray airport dust. He looked at the 12 armed MPs forming an impenetrable wall of Kevlar and steel around me. He looked at the major standing at attention. His brain short-circuited. He couldn't accept the reality playing out in front of him. In his world, money bought compliance. Money bought respect. He was the tech CEO. He was the golden boy. I was just the punchline to his jokes. Rachel. Garrett stammered, stepping forward. He forced a sickeningly fake, nervous laugh. He reached his hand out, trying to push past the nearest soldier to grab my arm. "Come on, tell them to back off. Tell them we're family. We have a flight to catch." He never made it past the perimeter. The MP nearest to Garrett didn't hesitate. He dropped his shoulder, stepped into the space, and drove the hard composite stock of his AR-15 directly into Garrett's chest. It wasn't a gentle push. It was a tactical strike. Garrett choked, stumbling backward and crashing hard into the brass stanchion holding the velvet ropes. The heavy metal pole tipped over, hitting the tile floor with a loud clang. "Back the fuck up!" The MP barked, his hand resting aggressively on his sidearm. "Maintain distance from the senior officer. Do it now." Garrett stayed down. He grabbed his chest, gasping for air. The fake smile was gone. "Officer!" The word came from my father. He stepped out from behind my mother, his face the color of old cement. He looked at the major's uniform, then at the heavy steel card resting on the marble counter, and finally at me. He looked at my scuffed combat boots and my faded jacket like he was seeing them for the very first time. "Colonel," Dad whispered. His voice was shaking. The man who had dismissed my military acceptance letter 19 years ago as a way to save tuition money was trembling. "You're Colonel 1. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just gave him a slow single nod. Abraham Lincoln once said that nearly all men can stand adversity, but if you want to test a man's character, give him power. I had spent almost 2 decades without any power in this family. I took their insults, I hauled their luggage, I ate the dry scraps they threw on my plate. Garrett was given power. He was handed money, praise, and a platinum medallion card, and he used it to publicly humiliate his own flesh and blood. He failed the test. I looked down at Garrett. He was staring up at me from the floor. The flashing amber security lights caught the sweat beading on his forehead. He was surrounded by hundreds of strangers holding up their iPhones. Dozens of camera lenses were zoomed in right on his terrified, pathetic face. Every tech blog, every Reddit forum, every local news station in California would have this footage by noon. The great Silicon Valley CEO laid out on the floor of LAX, crying over a piece of cheap thermal paper. I reached down and picked up my code red ID card from the counter. I slid it back into my jacket pocket. "You were right, Garrett," I said. My voice was quiet, but it carried perfectly through the dead silence of the terminal. He blinked, confusion warring with the panic in his eyes. "I don't belong in economy," I continued, my eyes locking onto his. "And you don't have the clearance to sit on the same flight as me." I turned my back on him. I didn't look at my mother. I didn't look at my father. I didn't owe them an explanation. I didn't owe them a tear. "Major," I said, addressing the officer standing rigidly at attention. "Yes, ma'am." "Clear a path to the tarmac. Let's go." "Moving out, make a hole," the sergeant yelled. The MPs pivoted, forming a flying wedge in front of me. The massive crowd of onlookers parted like the Red Sea. They scrambled out of the way, still holding their phones high, recording every second of my exit. I walked right through the middle of the terminal. I didn't rush. I didn't look back. I let the sound of my boots on the hard floor set the pace. I walked straight past the VIP security checkpoint. The TSA agents had already unlocked the heavy steel doors leading out to the private tarmac. The doors swung open. The cool, heavy Pacific Ocean air hit my face, smelling of salt and jet fuel. Out on the black asphalt, bathed in the glow of the runway lights, sat the C-37B military jet. Sleek, black, powerful. The auxiliary power unit was whining a high-pitched scream that promised absolute speed. A crew chief in a flight suit stood at the bottom of the air stairs waiting for me. I walked up the metal stairs. I stepped into the cabin and the heavy door pulled shut behind me, sealing with a pneumatic hiss. The noise of Los Angeles. The noise of my brother. The noise of 19 years of suffocating expectations. It was all cut off in a single second. The cabin was silent. I walked to the nearest leather captain's chair and sat down. I pulled the heavy 5-point harness over my shoulders and clicked the metal buckle into place. The jet engine spooled up a deep, vibrating roar that shook the deck plates. We began to taxi. I reached into my pocket. My cheap burner phone was vibrating aggressively against my thigh. The cheap burner phone in my pocket vibrated against my thigh like a trapped insect. I ignored it. I sank deeper into the oversized leather captain's chair. The C-37B military jet leveled out at 40,000 feet. The cabin was a masterclass in taxpayer-funded isolation. Thick aviation soundproofing, polished walnut bulkheads, soft ambient lighting. There were no crying babies back here. No arrogant tech CEOs screaming at exhausted gate agents about their platinum status. Just the low, steady, powerful hum of twin Rolls-Royce engines pushing us across the dark Pacific Ocean. A young Air Force staff sergeant stepped out of the forward galley. Crisp uniform. Professional distance. He walked over and set a heavy crystal glass on the table next to me. 2 square ice cubes. 2 fingers of Kentucky bourbon. "Anything else, Colonel?" he asked. "No, thank you, Sergeant." He gave a sharp nod and disappeared back into the galley. I picked up the glass. The heavy ice clinked against the crystal walls. A sharp, clean sound. I took a slow sip. The bourbon burned hot and smoky down my throat, washing away the lingering bitter taste of stale airport air. For the first time in 72 hours, the tight, heavy knot at the base of my skull began to loosen. The burner phone buzzed again. A long, continuous, desperate vibration. I pulled it out of my jacket and set it on the walnut table next to my drink. The cracked glass screen lit up in the dim cabin, flashing a relentless, endless stream of notifications. I unlocked the device. I tapped the blue bird icon. X, formerly known as Twitter. It took less than 40 minutes. The internet is a brutal, highly efficient machine when it smells blood in the water. The video was already the #1 trending topic in the United States. Someone standing in the economy line had captured the whole thing in high definition. The footage showed Garrett holding up the flimsy thermal ticket, his voice echoing off the terminal walls. First class isn't for people living paycheck to paycheck. It showed my mother turning her back on me, and then it showed the shift. The flashing red security lights, the dozen heavily armed military police swarming the counter. The major snapping a crisp salute. It showed Garrett falling backward over his own Louis Vuitton bag like a terrified child. The internet dragged him out to the public square. The comment section was a digital firing squad. "Look at this clown in the Armani suit crying on the floor. He tried to flex his wallet on a full-bird army colonel. Absolute garbage human. Anybody know what company this guy runs time to short the stock? Let's ruin him." They found him. The internet always finds them. His full name, his face, his Silicon Valley startup, all plastered across thousands of message boards. They dubbed him the worst brother in America. A public relations nightmare unfolding in real time. His digital empire was burning to the ground while he was stuck in a terminal building, unable to stop the bleeding. I closed the application and opened my text messages. 52 unread texts, 14 missed calls. The first block of messages was from Mom. "Rachel, honey, where are you? The military men won't let us near the private gate. Why didn't you tell us, a colonel? We had no idea. Your father is in shock. I am so proud of you. I always knew you were doing important work. Please call me back." I stared at the 3 red heart emojis. My thumb hovered over the glowing glass. 19 years in the shadows. 2 combat deployments. A heavy caliber bullet tearing through my shoulder. She called me clumsy for bleeding on her schedule. She gave me the driest, chalkiest scraps of meat at the Thanksgiving table. Now sitting in a plastic chair in the terminal, watching federal agents salute the daughter she treated like dirt, she suddenly found her maternal pride. It didn't warm my heart. It made my stomach turn. It was cheap. It was fake. A desperate grab for proximity to power. I scrolled down to Garrett's messages. They were a frantic wall of text. "Rach, please pick up the phone. The airline bumped us. They canceled our first-class tickets because of the security incident at the desk. We are sitting at a terrible gate waiting for a standby flight to Maui. Are you seeing the internet? You have to fix this right now. My board of directors is calling me. The stock is tanking in after-hours trading. Call me. Post a video saying it was a joke. Tell them we have a great relationship. Rachel, you are killing me. You are ruining my life." I read the last line twice. You are ruining my life. He didn't apologize. Not a single word of regret for what he tried to do to me in front of hundreds of people. He didn't care about the humiliation he tried to inflict. He only cared that his bank account was taking a hit. He wanted the useless desk jockey to throw him a lifeline. He wanted me to clean up his mess. I picked up the crystal glass. I finished the bourbon in one long, slow swallow. The ice hit the bottom of the glass with a dull thud. I picked up the burner phone. I didn't type a reply. I didn't send a thumbs up. I pressed my thumb hard against the power button on the side of the plastic casing. Slide to power off. I swiped right. The screen went black. The relentless buzzing finally died. I dropped the dead phone into the bottom of my canvas duffel bag. I leaned my head back against the heavy leather headrest and turned my face toward the small oval window. Outside, the pitch-black sky was beginning to fracture. A thin, violent line of blood-red light cut across the dark horizon of the Pacific Ocean. Dawn was breaking. The lobby of the luxury Honolulu resort smelled like fresh orchids and expensive coconut wax. Ceiling fans with massive wooden blades chopped slowly through the heavy air-conditioned air. I walked through the automatic sliding glass doors. I wasn't wearing cheap faded denim anymore. I wore my Army service uniform, dress blues. The fabric was tailored, sharp, immaculate. Silver eagles pinned perfectly to the shoulders. 3 rows of combat ribbons and campaign medals rested on my left chest. The Purple Heart sat dead center, catching the warm light of the lobby. My boots were polished to a mirror shine, striking the marble floor with a heavy rhythmic thud. I spotted them near the concierge desk. They were huddled on a curved cream-colored velvet sofa. They looked like refugees from a country club. The standby flight out of LAX had absolutely destroyed them. Garrett's custom linen suit was a rumpled, pathetic mess. He had spilled coffee down his lapel. His tie was gone. He was aggressively chewing on the side of his thumb, bouncing his knee up and down in a frantic, nervous rhythm. Mom and Dad sat stiffly next to him. They looked exhausted, pale, and terrified. Garrett saw me first. He stopped chewing his thumb. He stood up. His legs actually wobbled. He didn't look like a Silicon Valley titan anymore. He didn't look like the man holding that thermal plane ticket. He looked like a cornered animal waiting for the hammer to drop. He took a step forward. The smell of stale airplane sweat, cheap liquor, and sour breath hit me. "Rachel," he choked out. No snark, no condescending smirk. Just raw, pathetic desperation. "You came." I stopped 3 feet away. I didn't offer my hand. I kept my spine rigid, my chin level. "I have a tactical briefing at Hickam Air Force Base in 20 minutes. I have exactly 3 minutes for this." Dad tried to stand up. He placed his hands on his knees, pushing down hard, but his strength failed him. He sank back into the sofa, staring wide-eyed at the silver eagles on my shoulders. Mom had a crumpled tissue pressed tight against her mouth. Her mascara was smeared dark under her eyes. "The board." Garrett stammered, his voice cracking. He rubbed his face with trembling hands. "They're calling an emergency meeting. Investors are pulling their funding. The video. Rach, it has 12 million views. They're doxing my kids' schools. They're destroying my life." I looked at him, cold, clinical. Actions have consequences. I was jealous. The admission ripped out of his throat loud and ugly. A few wealthy tourists standing at the hotel bar turned their heads to stare. Garrett didn't care. He was bleeding out on the marble floor. "Okay, is that what you want to hear? You always had this quiet discipline. Even when we treated you like absolute garbage, you never broke. You never cried. It made me feel so damn small. So I bought big things. I made loud noises. I needed you to be a loser, so I could feel like a winner." He reached out, his hands shaking violently, but he stopped short of actually touching the dark blue fabric of my uniform. The military police at LAX had taught him that hard lesson. "Please." Garrett begged, tears welling up in his bloodshot eyes. "Just one post, a joint statement on Twitter. Take a picture with me. Tell them it was a misunderstanding. Tell them I'm a good brother. Please, Rachel, save me." I looked at the man who had handed me expired grocery coupons at Thanksgiving. I looked at the mother who had told me to walk 10 paces behind them so I wouldn't ruin their image. I looked at the father who told me to stick to my little desk job. I didn't feel anger. The rage was gone. All that was left was a massive, echoing canyon where my family used to be. "No." Garrett recoiled like I had just driven a combat knife into his ribs. "What?" "You need the pain, Garrett. It's the only way you'll ever grow up." I kept my voice low, steady, and completely devoid of emotion. I forgive you. For all of it. But I will never let you shrink me down to fit into your world ever again. I looked at my parents. They wouldn't meet my eyes. They just stared at the floor. Have a good vacation, I said. Lose my number. I didn't wait for Mom to start sobbing. I didn't wait for Dad to stammer out a hollow apology. I executed a perfect sharp about face. The rubber sole of my boot squeaked against the marble. I walked out of the lobby. The heavy glass doors slid shut behind me. The humid, salted Hawaiian air hit my face. I climbed into the back of a waiting black government Tahoe. Pearl Harbor, I told the driver. We parked near the water's edge just as the sun was beginning to set. I got out and walked alone along the shoreline. The sky was bleeding into the Pacific, turning the water the color of crushed copper and bruised purple. Out in the harbor, the stark white structure of the USS Arizona Memorial floated quietly above the dark waves. A tomb for over 1,000 men who died serving something bigger than themselves. I took a slow, deep breath. The ocean breeze was clean. It tasted like freedom. I didn't need a seat in first class. I didn't need a seat at a Thanksgiving table where the meat was dry and the love was conditional. I had the uniform on my back. I had the men and women who trusted me with their lives. And for the first time in 42 years, I finally had myself. If you like this story, please hit the like button, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you in the next video.